Hello, my name's Simon Walker. I'm showing the Parallel Effects practical, how to configure your parallel effects in a DAW. I'm using Ableton Live 9 Suite. I've recorded some tracks using the Ableton Push as the MIDI controller, and I'm using stock Ableton instruments from the Suite edition. What I'm doing is showing you how to use reverb and delay to make a mix more interesting and professional sounding and much more authentic. First thing you need to know in a DAW is how to set up and what a return track looks like. The most important thing to know with Ableton is that it doesn't use buses like Loud and Stern has been talking about. It calls them simply just return tracks, and you don't have to configure buses. So what you do to insert a MIDI track is you go up here, to insert a return track, sorry, you go up here and you hit Insert Return Track. And you can see all of a sudden we've got the C track has now just been created. I'm just going to get rid of that because we don't need it. And you can see we've got A reverb and B delay already loaded by Ableton. How you adjust the settings of that. So this is where you go in Ableton. The most important thing with both the reverb and delay is that you have your wet-dry mix set to 100% to avoid phase cancellation. You can see with both of these options, the wet-dry mix is set up to 100%. In these options here at the bottom, you can adjust anything to do with the reverb. Down there, you've got all the different settings, and the delay, again, I've set it up so that I've got a short delay time in the left, and I've got an even shorter delay time in the right. It's all synced to the BPM of the track, and I've got a long feedback because I'm creating quite a long tapered ping pong delay is what I'm creating here. So that's how everything's set up. Okay, so the other important things to talk about with the reverbs and delays is if you are using these tracks, you can control all of your reverb and delay settings just from these simple panels down here. So you can adjust how all of the reverb and delays work just by adjusting one control for each. This saves you loads of time if you have to go through 20 parts and adjust how each of their delays work. The other nice thing is with if you're all using the same delay, or a synced version of that delay, you'll get a really tight sounding delay in the mix, whereas if you've got some parts that are using different delays, you're going to end up sometimes having conflicts, or it might get quite muddy. It doesn't mean you can't use individual delays, but you've got to take a much greater care using them. The other big benefit is if you're using this in a live performance situation or recording, is if you use individual reverb and delay for every single part, you're going to use a lot of your CPU. In Ableton, your CPU is up here in the top right hand corner, and what I'm just going to do is quickly play you a part that shows you how much CPU usage there is. And this one has got two parts that have got their own individual delay tracks on. And then what I'm going to do is turn off the delay, and you'll see how much the CPU usage drops. So if I just play you this part quickly, you won't hear any audio. So it's playing now, and this is already up at 21%, 21 again. So you can see that spiking at about 21. So if I now just go into these tracks and just quickly turn off, there's one. So I've just turned off their individual delays. If I just hit play again, you can see now we're only up at 19% for the same part. 19% again. So you can see just with one plugin on two tracks, I've just saved 2% on my CPU usage. So just imagine if you had that multiplied by 5 or 10 across the board, you're going to save yourself a whole load of space. Okay, so how do you use this in your settings? Over here, we've got our first channel strip, and what you'll see here are these two buttons, Sends A and Sends B. If you notice, these sit here, but they actually send from the very end of the channel strip, because if you look over here, I've got the sends selected as post the channel strip, not pre. In Ableton, you can change this to the sensor pre or the sensor post. This obviously affects if you're doing any monitoring, want to set up any individual mixes. So my A and B sensor both post the channel strip and the faders and any plugins you put in on the channel strip. So what you do is you can just basically slide how much you want to send of this audio into your channel A or your channel B, and that then is going to give you how much reverb the track actually has. And the same with the delay, how much of this track do you want to send to have delay applied to it? So you can send all of it, you can just send some of it, you can send none of it at all, it's up to you. The other thing you'll notice as well is that I actually also have my delay return track actually sending into my reverb track. The reason I chose to do this on this track was because it's quite a simple track. I wanted the delay to have a lot of presence to it, so you'll actually find that there's reverb being applied to the delay of the audio, which just means that it's more present in the mix. If I don't have to do this, I could adjust this all the way down to 0 and it would just be a normal delay. But this is going to have the delay effect, and then it's going to have reverb applied to that delay as well. I'm just going to show you a little video now showing you that the effect is post fader. So what this will show you is that I'm going to play you one of these tracks up here. You're going to hear a violin part, and then I'm going to adjust the fader down here, and you're going to see an impact in these reverb and delay parts over here. Right, so here we can see audio track at the top. I'm just going to play this clip here, and you're going to see what happens when the fader at the bottom of the screen moves. So I'm playing the clip, and here we go, and I'm just going to move the fader down. You can hear how the reverb and the delay are staying the same, but because the main track has got quieter, they just fade out. And then you fade the track back in, and you'll suddenly hear all the reverb and delay kicks back in, and that's how you know that it's a post-fader send to channel A and channel B. Okay, so I just want to talk about what I've done with this violin part here. It's an accompaniment sort of chord based thing that's going to sit in the background. When you're dealing with your audio, if you see here, all of the audio coming out of the bottom of these channel strips is being sent over here to both the master volume, so you hear the actual dry signal from the instrument, but it's also being sent to these reverb and delay channels, which are then sending their audio to the master over here as well. So you're having a whole load of audio going into the master based on different sends that you've got. So what I did with this track, because I want the chords to sit in the background and for the sound not to be so prominent, is instead of sending the dry audio to the master and sending the delay and reverb there, I only sent the audio into this delay channel and this reverb channel, because it then means that it sits much more in the background and it's more atmospheric. So I'm just going to quickly show you now what that looks like. So this is the part with the actual audio being sent to the master as well as the reverb. So I'll just change this here quickly. So master, and off we go. I'll just start that. Okay, so we can hear what that sounds like. Now I'm just going to change that to sends only, and now I'll play this again. So you can hear that actual sound that's in the foreground has gone, and you're just hearing the more atmospheric sounds in the background. That means it sits behind the other instruments in the mix and is much more of an accompaniment. So that's what you can do with that, and that's really important to learn when you're creating layers and textures of sounds, that it doesn't all have to go into the master. You can just send the delay or the reverbed sound itself, which is really cool. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about this violin part here. You can see that I've got less reverb on it, and I haven't sent it to the delay channel. What you can do when you've got a lot of accompaniment parts that are sat in the background with a lot of reverb or delay on them is, if you want to focus people's attention on one particular part, you can have a lot less reverb or delay on it and bump the volume up slightly, and that will actually draw people's attentions to it, and it stands out because it doesn't have reverb or delay on it as much. I've also added a bit of compression on this just to bump up the volume slightly. So I'll just play this scene here for you. You can see the compression there. Okay, so what we should do now is, before finishing the lesson, just actually listen to how all of these different tracks combine and how the different effects work together, so that you can see how these tracks sit together in the mix. So let's have a listen. Okay, so that's everything that we've needed to learn from this lesson. I've shown you how to actually set up your aux return tracks, which is Ableton's version of buses. Shown you how to add a new one. I've shown you how these interact with the master. I've also shown you about post-fader and pre-fader sends, so you can see that if you adjust the fader on a track, that it affects how much signal goes to the reverb and the delay. The one thing I haven't shown you is you can use these faders to actually control how much reverb and delay is actually present within the track. So you can actually, if you adjust these faders up and down, that will actually alter how much reverb and delay there is present in the mix. I've also shown you how to send the tracks to your channels with your send A, send B. I've shown you how to actually control where your audio goes to, that you can send it both to your send channels, but that you can also send it to specific audio channels as well. I haven't shown you how to do that. That's something for you to experiment with in your own time, but that's really useful for sending MIDI data into an audio track, so you can record MIDI into audio. That's really cool. So that's all the information you need to know there. What I'm just going to share with you now, that's basically the end of my lesson. I am just going to share with you one of the things that I learned whilst I was setting this up, which is when you're trying to make a mix as lifelike and professional as possible, one of the things you want to do is play with the people play with their ears so that it sounds like the mix is coming from different areas all around them. What you need to do for that, what you need to learn to do, is to actually layer or have instruments pan to the left and to the right, and reverb and delay is really useful with this. So what I'm just going to quickly show you is the piano parts here, piano 1 and piano 2. I've centered the pan on them. These are the pan knobs. I've centered this, and you're just going to hear them one at a time. And then what I'm going to do is then show you what happens if you pan them left and right and play them both at the same time. So this is part 1 just by itself. So you can see there's not a massive amount of stereo effect. You can see it's very central. Both parts are pretty much the same. And then if we go over to part 2, and you can hear this one as well. This is the one that's using the replica delay, which is set up almost the same as the normal delay on the track, but slightly differently. Okay, so that's how those sound if they're centered. But if I get them to work together and I pan this one sort of most of the way, sort of halfway to the left, pan this one halfway to the right, and then I'm actually going to play both of the tracks together. And if I now show you what that sounds like, you'll see that there's a more complex effect because you've got two slightly different delays but both working together on the same track.